The game Man of War was highly criticized, especially on the launch, yet I am here to give a different perspective. What I want to bring up might sound at first like a pathetic rant of a fanboy, yet I think a lot of issues have been overblown and a lot of positives overlooked. A lot of people made up their minds before even playing the game because of videos like those made by Remy, who, by the way, has only 3.5 hours of recorded playtime, which supposedly was enough to make an entire video trash talking the game while making mistake after mistake combined with some weird nostalgia posting, which in the end brings nothing to the table.
One of the best parts of Men of War is like, when you're digging in, you're like, grab the MG! Holy shit, reman the AT gun! We need to get on the AA!
In my humble opinion, Men of War is a great addition to a franchise. A lot of features and mechanics have been added, like concealment, camouflage, planes, different modes, the controversial battalion system, front lines, as well as a new retreat system. Big point is that supposedly UI is horrendously bad. I get it, you might prefer more stylized UI like it was in the older games, it's fine, but acting like the Men of War has some horrible monster of a UI is obnoxious and basically lying.
The UI is actually one of the worst fucking UIs I've seen in a while. This is just disgusting. What is specifically this part of the UI right here? This is grotty. And I hate it.
I'm sorry, but here we have literally the most simple minimalistic design of a UI you could get. There's nothing confusing and it looks like basically any decent UI from 2024. What actually interests me is what is the problem with a specific part of the UI that was brought up. Is it ugly? Don't think so. Confusing? I think most people can understand what is it displaying. It will start a pattern which we'll be able to notice of people trying to basically hang on to anything just to criticize the game for any reason. I will also have to bring up the UI of another game which most people, especially in a Steam comment section compared to Men of War 2, Gates of Hell. As you can see, the UI is basically the same, except it's basically just more crowded and less clear, especially that you cannot pick different types of ammunition. While the other game does not get any criticism for it, this one supposedly does. Please tell me which one looks better, cleaner and more readable, like, let's be real guys.
Oh. Man, this UI design is absolutely dog shit. Why is repairing here? Why is exit vehicle and destroy it is here? And then normally leave the vehicle is here?
Alright, so let's examine this UI so I can explain why it actually does make sense. Like you can see, on the left side we have our drop of crew action, in the middle repair action, while self-destruct is kinda hidden on the right. So, let's start with self-destruct, cause it's really easy. Self-destructing your vehicle is a really rare action, you basically don't want to do it ever. So it does make sense it's not in the middle where you can for example click it by mistake while wanting to camouflage your tank or a car. Repairing action is in the middle once again for an obvious reason. Repairing is a really common thing you do in the game, and on top of that you want to know when it's available or not, because knowing it you are also informed if the tank you have selected requires any repairs or it doesn't. Last thing is the drop of crew button, which is placed on the left side of the screen. It might sound weird at first, but if you actually examine, you will notice it is placed in the part of the UI responsible for the crew management and formation, which, as you can imagine, is basically a perfect place for it. I do not want to repeat myself, but once again we can see the critics bringing up a point which basically has no standing in the conversation.
There was a lot of feedback where there was too much cluster on the UI. The UI makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It is disgusting to look at and almost impossible to read at places.
Once again, Men of War 2 has basically the same UI as Gates of Hell. The only difference, it's a little bit more transparent, which I would say is good, and more minimalistic, which just looks more modern and looks much better in current age.
The horrible arcadey UI.
I would really want those critics to explain to me what does it mean for the UI to be arcadey. I do understand you might prefer something more stylized in like Second World War, but I'm sorry, let's not bitch about a game trying to look modern in 2024. Alright, we can actually play this game in reverse. Here we have UI from Men of War Assault Squad 2, the game which supposedly has so much better UI than Men of War 2, even though it's like 10 years old game. We can instantly notice a number of issues. For example, why there are two attack buttons, why the weapon is displayed on the left side of the screen while ammunition is on the right side of the screen. What does the explosion button does? Can you kamikaze your sniper over here? Why the range button is once again being displayed twice? And what does it mean? Can you repair your sniper? Also, a big chunk of your screen is covered by the non-transparent UI to the opposite of Men of War 2, which means you completely cannot see through it what's happening on the map. And I'm not saying this is a bad UI, I'm just saying every UI has to do some compromises. And compromises which Men of War 2 did do not change the fact it's still a good UI. We're gonna get here also to one point which was brought up by one critic specifically, which is completely confusing, which is the fact that units go over the trenches instead of through them.
No, I'm going over the trenches! Can you imagine what they've done? Do you think they went over the trenches? They run on top of trenches to get to trenches. Just run through the trenches. Why does the pathfinding not just make them go through trenches?
Answer is really simple. Pathfinding is not here to think for you. Units will go from point A to point B while using the shortest path available. That's how it works in every single RTS. And you have to acknowledge those trenches he's talking about are not the ones you would build yourself. Those are actually trench looking like decorations which don't act like the trenches you would dig up yourself. The previous YouTube creator has not noticed, I suppose, that the trenches he's talking about are not trenches. Those are trench looking like decorations on the map. They are behaving like anything else, like any bump, any rock, any fence. If you actually use trenches, like the ones you can build yourself, your units will nicely path through them. Safely going like so, you can see, doesn't peek, doesn't go over, he's nice and safe. That's how it always used to be. That's how trenches work in this game, but trenches, not world map decorations. Biggest accusation towards the game is that it's supposedly arcadey. As much as I suppose it's true, I would say calling Men of War 2 just arcadey completely misses the point. Better word for it would be competitive. Men of War 2 became much more competitive game than a simulator one.
It didn't feel realistic at all. It's like a mobile game. It's like an arcade game. It's arcade, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work having a kind of arcadey game where the damage is quick. It just things like arcade game. A bit like a tower defense game. Things just explode all over the place, and it doesn't feel great. And that's another thing. The explosions looked arcadey.
Fans don't want an arcadey Company of Heroes title. That series and that franchise has had its own issues for those reasons, and trying to copy it and going down the same route just isn't a smart idea. But Men of War 2, the early versions we saw, just tend to blur the lines a little bit. It tended to go down that more arcadey nature, and no one quite knew why.
Calling Men of War an arcade game or a mobile game is completely missing the point. We can see that some changes could make the game more arcade-ish, but for sure not an arcade game. Most of the changes were made for a good reason. They were supposed to make the game more clear, readable for those people who enjoy more competitive side of it. While the previous iterations of the game mostly focus on the coolness factor or the visuals, Men of War clearly wants you to know what is happening on the screen, wants you to understand the gameplay and get better at it over time. It provides much more replayability and enjoyment in the long term, where you can get better with every match, instead of being a chill game which you play just for a role-playing factor. As much as I understand that some people might just prefer the more chill role-play gameplay experience that Men of War Assault Squad 2 provided, I would say it's not valid to completely toss out this great game because it doesn't completely fulfill your expectation in this context.
They gave most of the feedback that the health bars didn't make any sense on vehicles.
Yet again, we've ended up with fucking health bars for vehicles. This is never going to be the way I want to play Men of War. I do not want health bars, Sam I am. I do not want them.
And this is one of the more deceptive points given against Men of War 2. I'm sorry guys to inform you, but all the games you like, Men of War Assault Squad 2, Gates of Hell, all have health bars on vehicles. The only difference is that they are not visible. They are visible in Men of War 2, once again, because they are trying to make the game more competitive and try to make it more readable to the player. Which is really important if you don't treat the game just as a visual show.
I mean, this is a fucking boring match, I'll be honest. Oh, there you go, they just bombed me. And as you'll see, I survived because my HP says I'm on 19 HP.
Yes, that's how health works in video games. That's how it works in Gates of Hell, that's how it works in Men of War Assault Squad 2, the one that you like so much. Third most brought up point against Men of War 2 is the unit cap. Out of all things mentioned before, I think this is the most valid point. I understand that some people could prefer bigger battles with more units, but I would say that Man of War 2 going with smaller skirmishes, with small units but a lot of players, makes the game much more interactive and also makes you more focused on what your units actually do, instead of just putting them somewhere on the position to defend for the rest of the match.
By the way, I'm out of units. There you go. That's my unit cap. Here you go. This is my entire unit cap. This artillery piece, this jeep, 5 guys, and this M1 machine gun and cannon. It's an anti-aircraft gun. That is my entire army.
Yes, this is your entire unit cap. But I suppose if you are comparing everything to Man of War or Gates of Hell, just saying, if you'll be playing Man of War Assault Squad 2 on normal settings, you would have even less units at the start of the game. That's how early games look in those type of games. This is no different, except you are not spending some magical points, you are actually using a set of units which you can deploy sooner or later, and every single lost unit will not come back. Which means that every single maneuver, every single skirmish will be much more impactful and by extension of it much more rewarding. I actually checked Man of War Assault Squad 2, and with whatever points you have at the start of the game, you can only summon one squad, which is 5 or maybe 6 units. So what are we talking about here? So with main points brought up by YouTube creators addressed, we can jump into Steam comment reviews. We will be able to notice the pattern of people basically being incorrect about the game they supposedly played, mostly because all the information they actually have comes from those YouTube videos and not from their own experiences. We have a lot of people who compare Man of War 2 to Gates of Hell, which is once again not fair way to judge the game. Those are two completely different experiences. Gates of Hell focuses on realistic visuals and role-playing factor, while Man of War 2 will be focusing on the competitive side of the experience. It is completely fine to have a preference, but it's not fine to dogpile one game. We also can see comparisons to Companion of Heroes which are completely unfounded. If somebody compares Man of War 2 to Companion of Heroes, you know they didn't play either of those titles. Units in Companion of Heroes are much more durable, which is actually really funny because people seem to have a problem with how easy to kill infantry is in Man of War 2. In Companion of Heroes you build buildings to produce units, which is a completely different idea than what we have in Man of War 2. If anything, it is more aligned with what we have in Man of War Assault Squad 2 or Gates of Hell. Man of War 2 includes actually realistic penetration, where you cannot, for example, destroy a tank with a machine gun. In Company of Heroes, if you will shoot at a tank with basically any firearm, at some point it will get destroyed. We will also look at those two longer reviews because I think they have some interesting points that we can address. And yeah, once again we have comparison to Company of Heroes and Gates of Hell, so we can assume most of the information will be coming from YouTube videos we just addressed. So let's start with the first point. Artillery pieces always perfectly hit with the first or second round. I can't really disprove it with facts and logic, but here you can see a little bit sped up video of me trying to hit a tank from the other side of the map, which is not that easy. It's to a great extent just luck, just saying. That's how the artillery just works in the end. But let's not pretend like it's so magically perfectly accurate in Man of War 2. A stupid concealment mechanic which you are forced to use, which requires you to do a lot of needless micro. It is not needless, you need it to not show your artillery to the enemy. On top of that, just saying that Man of War 2, once again I will mention it, tries to be a competitive game. And if you have a problem that it requires a little bit of micro, I understand Gates of Hell will be more attuned to your needs if you just prefer a chill visual role-playing semi-RTS experience. And of course, HP on vehicles. Once again, every single game Gates of Hell, Man of War Assault Squad 2 has HP on vehicles. The only difference is it is being displayed in Man of War 2. And no, your tank will not blow out of nothing. You still need to hit it into something vital like an engine, preferably with a piercing round, especially when you are fighting a heavy tank. And here you have basically double thing. You want something more realistic, yet you want more HP on infantry. I'm sorry, but in Second World War, when you are getting shot with basically any firearm, you most likely will be dead or not able to continue combat. For you, the game requires too much micro, too much APM, and you're not able to deploy any sensible tactics. I'm sorry, but it tells me only one thing: skill issue. The game Man of War wants you to control your units much more effectively than the other games. You have less units at max, but you are supposed to use them much more effectively. The game actually doesn't require that much micro, but you know what? It allows you to deploy so much more of it. You are able to get so much more value out of your units if you actually know how to properly micromanage them. It is, I would say, an amazing feature of this game, and it makes it stand out compared to the others, where mostly the biggest choice is not what do you do with your units, but what units do you get. Sometimes you will not be able to recruit your own vehicles, which is basically just a prevention so that you cannot abuse the mechanics of the game. I'm sorry, just make a little bit of space in your cap points and you'll be good, you can do it. It is not that hard to understand. And I actually did learn some stuff about Gates of Hell. Supposedly, the infantry cannot shoot while moving, and anti-air, designed to shoot at planes, cannot shoot at planes, which is quite funny. I will also mention I'm ignoring the reviews about online only because it's not the case anymore, and it is not the case for some time. You can play offline if you want to. We also have this review from a person who was banned from their Discord for harassing, which once again brings up the same problems which we addressed. HP on vehicles, which is in basically every game. Supposedly vehicles feel like go-karts, but I would say there's literally no difference between Man of War 2 and other games. And again, comparing Man of War 2 to Gates of Hell. This time also bringing some stuff about the devs being passive-aggressive, while basically they are trying to point out the bullshit people spread in their comments. Here dev politely reminds people that you can actually enable a realism mode if you prefer this type of gameplay. Here they point out that the game is right now fully playable offline because a lot of people still don't know it is. I can only assume that that comment was written because somebody was salty because they got banned because they were harassing the devs on the Discord server. If it comes to graphics, I would say Man of War 2 looks really good. I am really happy with it. About crashes, I'm not sure. I suppose they happen, but really rarely from my experience. So yeah, to sum it up, I would say Man of War 2 is a really good game. I enjoy it. Some of you might not. As I said, if you prefer something more chill, roleplay, visuals and stuff, Man of War 2 might not be for you. The game looks good, plays really nice, has a really good feeling, and the competitive side is really fun. I really like trying out new strats, climbing up the ladder, sometimes winning, sometimes losing. The game might be hard at the start, like any RTS, it has quite a high skill floor, but I would say that if you learn the mechanics and give it some time and patience, you will enjoy it as much as I do. So, I hope you liked the video, I hope you didn't take it too seriously. Just saying, if you don't like Man of War, it's completely fine, but I would say actually try it and not just follow the crowd and the mob mentality, because in the end, as much as it's not for everybody, I would say it doesn't deserve the hate it got in the end. So, I wish you good night, Mountain Cat out.